Hello, and today I thought I'd talk about something that's often on my mind, and this is why it is performers have this desire to perform and how strong that desire can be. I recently watched a clip of about the Greatest Showman and Hugh Jackman, and it was a situation in which Hugh Jackman was not supposed to be singing on doctor's orders. He'd had some surgery on his nose, and he had to sell the film, but he was just going to stand there and be front and centre, but not sing. And you could see as the time went on, something built up inside him, and he had this huge desire to sing, and eventually he did sing. It was like he couldn't help himself but sing. Um, and I don't know a singer out there who hasn't felt like that huge urge to sing. I gave up singing for nearly 20 years, and there were times where I would dream about singing and wake up with tears coming down my cheeks because I was so upset that I wasn't fulfilling that need. Sometimes we can't, or we don't, meet that need for some reason, and it can be all sorts of reasons. For me, it was really quite complex. I think I always thought that desire was something to do with showing off, about the need to put myself up there and to be acknowledged. And I was repeatedly told that I was too loud and needed to be quiet. But most importantly, I think one of the reasons I didn't sing for so long was I didn't believe I could sing in the way I had done in the past, in the way I really wanted to. I wasn't getting the feedback I used to get as a kid. For a lot of my clients, these fears can be bound up with fear of judgment and fear that if they put themselves out there, then they're not good enough, and they're not worthy to put themselves out there. And this again can relate to this idea that we're only putting ourselves out there to big ourselves up because we feel we're so brilliant and so important. I spoke to a lovely singer the other day, and she had both the fear of putting herself out there and this fear that if she got out there and let herself go, what would happen? She didn't know what would happen, and it was sort of related to her real fear that the real her was not good enough. So if she put herself out there, let herself go, what people would see, they wouldn't like. Now, all of these thoughts, all of these fears that might stop us singing or performing, don't actually get rid of that urge to sing, don't actually get rid of that desire to perform. And the reality is that urge isn't a bad thing. It isn't something that we need to suppress or push down. It isn't something we need to be ashamed of. Despite what I spent nearly 20 years of my life, well, probably all of my life, telling myself, it's not an egotistical thing. If you take a look at the clip, Hugh's desire to sing is not about being in the limelight. He is in the limelight. He's front and centre. He's the star of the show. He's a hugely famous and successful Hollywood actor. His urge was simply about wanting to sing the song, express that song. And the pleasure he gets from when he actually sings a song is so obvious and so contagious that it lights up the whole ensemble. You can see them all join in. So this brings me on to the other aspect that I wanted to talk about. With all these fears and hang-ups, we forget that singing is a collaborative process with our audience. Performing is collaborative. The best performers don't sing or act at their audience. They draw their audience in to engage with them and engage with what they're doing. And the audience thrives off their energy, and they thrive off the audience's energy. There's nothing worse than performing to a completely flat audience. And this made me think about some of the work of Dr. Dan Siegel I've been reading about on integration in relation to the mind and mental processes, and how mental illness is always to do with either there being too much rigidity in mental processes and behaviours or too much chaos. And sometimes it's about there being too much of both. And actually mental health being about balance and integration. And this is balance and integration that's not just internal within ourselves, but also about balance and integration with our relationships with other people. He says he often starts his lectures with something called a complexity choir, where he asks for volunteers from an audience who aren't singers and performers. He asks for volunteers to come up and form a choir. And the first exercise he gets them to do is he gets them to choose a note between themselves and hum it in unison. And it's a nice sound that comes out, but after not so very long it becomes monotonous in both senses of the words. And so he moves on to the second exercise. And in the second exercise, he gets them to cover their ears with their hands and sing a song of their choosing, their individual choosing. So they all choose mostly different songs and they sing it in a key of their choosing and they're not listening to the others singing. And obviously chaos ensues. And the audience finds this amusing to start off with, but quickly they get restless and the audience don't enjoy it. So he calls a halt to this one. And then the third exercise is he asks the choir to select a song amongst themselves, a single song for them all to sing, and then says they can harmonise at will. And so they start singing it together and gradually the harmonies come out. And he says, once the melody is established, the individual voices begin to emerge, weaving their harmonies above and below, playing off one another, moving intuitively toward a crescendo before the final notes, and faces light up in the choir and audience alike. We're all swept into the flow of the singer's energy and aliveness. At these times, people have said, and I've experienced this as well, there is a palpable sense of vitality that fills the room. Now, he uses this exercise to highlight the issues of rigidity and chaos. So in the first exercise, you have rigidity. No one is permitted to express themselves in the way they might want to. They have to stick to a single note. And that's both boring and constraining. In the second exercise, you have a cacophony of chaos. They're not integrating with each other, and this causes a sense of anxiety both in the choir and in the audience. Finally, in the last exercise, there's a balance. There is both order and freedom, and the choir and the audience both get a huge amount from this experience. So my question to you is rigidity or isolation holding you back in your world? Is it getting in the way of you creating that synergistic relationship with your audience? And also, what role is chaos or the fear of chaos playing in your life as well? So, thank you for joining me today. I hope you found it interesting. Bye-bye.